Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. So today I want to start something a little bit, a new kind of thing on this channel, in which I'm gonna call Follow the Path. And this is sort of a continuation of a discussion video that I did in the beginning of the year called Enriching Your Reading. And basically what I talked about was the different ways that we can engage with the things that we're reading, basically read more actively and do things that make the reading experience deeper, fuller, and some of the things I talked about in that video was annotating books, looking up words that you don't know, for example looking up words in dictionaries, or even just googling like terms that are historical or that are non-specific for your origin. I talked about different ways that you can engage with your reading, and one of the ways that I've tried to do in the first few weeks of the year is to allow one book to lead me on to the next. So this is why I'm calling it Follow the Path, and this is something that I've wanted to do several times in the past, but usually I just sort of postpone it and then it doesn't end up happening. So this time I really actively followed one book to the next, and you'll see sort of the connection in between as I go along. So I've tried to film this video several times because it's very difficult for me to sort of sum up these books because they are quite complicated and there's kind of big questions going on. So I will do my best. The book that sort of started all this is The End of Mr. Y by Scarlett Thomas, and this is a book about it's basically a literary mystery, and it is a fiction book that sort of discusses metaphysics, and especially one of the things that it deals with is the mind, because one of the characters in this book finds a sort of recipe that allows her to get into someone else's mind. It's basically like a hypnosis in the fact that you leave your body behind and your own body is in a sort of coma while your mind is going into someone else's mind. So you still exist, you're still aware of yourself in the other person's mind. So that is The End of Mr. Y, and I've talked about this in my wrap-ups, which I will link in the description. So in this book, the book is divided into sections, and the second section, or the second part, is introduced with two quotes, and one of the quotes is from an Edgar Allan Poe short story, which was the second thing I read. And the short story in question is called Mesmeric Revelation. So Mesmeric Revelation is basically a conversation between a doctor and a patient. So the patient himself has gone to this doctor several times, and the doctor has sort of done a thing called mesmerism. And mesmerism is a technique that was a sort of a concept that was very popular in the 19th century. Invisible natural force within all living things, and using that force is as a way of healing. And so mesmerism seems to me at least to be sort of similar to hypnosis in sort of opening up the mind and giving access to a sort of an inner core. So the conversation and their relationship seems to be reminiscent of a doctor and patient situation, because the person who is sort of interviewed is very ill, and he has summoned the doctor to his bedside because he has a lot of pain and things like that. So they are having this conversation about mesmerism, and they do this mesmerism experiment to have the actual conversation. The theme of reason and of God and religion is very prevalent throughout their conversation and throughout this short story. And they're talking about, for example, what is God? Is God a spirit or a matter? So their conversation is sort of the fact that they use mesmerism to sort of access the subconscious and it reminded me immediately of psychoanalysis, sort of digging into something beneath the surface. The effect of mesmerism in the short story seems very similar to the situation of the body in The End of Mr. Y and what happens when you leave the body. One of the things that come up in the short story is the fact that the patient can't exactly feel things in this state. When he has gone through mesmerism, he can't really feel things as vividly as he would in his awake state. And that is also very similar to The End of Mr. Y. She's the main character in The End of Mr. Y is constantly saying things like she should be able to feel pain, but she doesn't. She just sort of understands the concept of pain in this state, in the mind place thing. In this short story, there's another book mentioned, and it is called Charles Elwood, or The Infidel Converted, and it's written by O.A. Brownson, and the patient, I think, mentions this book as one of the things that he's read trying to figure out the existence of the soul and the physical reality of things. So he's read this book, and he mentions it in the passing as sort of as a way to say that he's done everything in order to find some core truth. So when I'd finished reading the short story, I moved on to Charles Elwood, and this is a book that came out in the middle of the 19th century, and it's a story about a man who is an infidel or unbeliever. He's an atheist. He was a Christian as a young boy, but he sort of lost his faith because he started to question things that he didn't understand in regard to religion, and all of the people around him basically said that if you question things, you're not religious. So he turns his back on religion, but still he kind of keeps on coming back to questions regarding religion and God and the existence of God and what that really truly is in the physical sense. In this story, the Charles Elwood, he lives in a very small town, and in this town there's constantly people trying to convert him into Christianity. So he has several conversations with different people, and as you go along he sort of comes closer and closer to some truth that changes him and changes the way that he views the world. So he constantly questions the existence of God and gets different answers depending on who he is questioning. Often the thing that comes up in this this novel is that truth is God and God is truth, and this question of which came first and which defines the other. And that is definitely sort of the main theme throughout this book, even though different characters give him different answers to this question. He's trying to find sort of an evidence of God through something that he can understand, and he is trying to find, at first he mentions things like he wants to understand through his senses, still constantly looking for some kind of evidence for his belief, because he doesn't want to just believe out of other people's thoughts. Another of the themes in this novel is definitely the main character's idea of understanding is believing. The belief leads to a religious thought, and that is why he is sort of questioning people in order to find this belief. He seems to really want some kind of religion, whether that be the same that the people around him has or something in a different form. So he has a conversation with one person in the beginning, and he's trying to figure out how he doesn't believe that there is any evidence of God through nature, whereas this person is saying that because nature is so perfect, it must be created by someone. It must have had a creator. But then he questions that through the fact that if God is the creator, who created God? If everything is created, how can this thing, this God, exist if he isn't created by something? So it's the contradictory thing in religion is one of the things that he has problems with and that he's grappling with throughout this book, and through every conversation this comes up. But then his the conversation that he later has in the novel is about this person basically says that God is the true essence of everything. So God is spirit, he says, and spirit, he means all of the things that is the core of a thing. So the core of a thing, the main, the essence, the importance in that thing is the spirit, and the spirit is God, because God is the only truth, the absolute truth. So he talks about the absolutes and the relatives and all of these things. So I am not religious. I'm an atheist myself, but I'm finding this especially the way that this conversation, about the reasoning and the absolute and the essence of something as God is really interesting, because it sort of reminds me of the ideas of Japanese religion, especially in Japan there's this idea of the kami in everything, the God in everything, but the kami isn't exactly a God figure like the figure in the Christianity that I am familiar with. It isn't one individual or one thing, but rather it's more of energy, is closer to the idea, I think, of the kami. At least that is how I have always understood it. And this approach, the essence of something as the spirit and the spirit as God, is something that I can kind of understand and also feel like it's more universal than all of the other ways that the religion comes up in this novel. This book is so, it is sort of demanding a lot of thought from me, and I'm finding it really interesting as a thought experiment as well. In this conversation, the man who he talks with, I can't remember his name, but this man, anyway, he quotes another book written by Alexander Pope from, it was published in the 18th century, and it's called An Essay on Man by Alexander Pope, and this is basically a long poem, and this poem is described as a philosophical poetry. As the author of the poem himself says that it's to vindicate the ways of God to man and to explore man's place in the universe. And so this poem is the next step that I've just started reading this. I just read the few sections in the novel Charles Elwood, and then continued on to actually pick up Alexander Pope's An Essay on Man. And again, I'm finding it incredibly interesting and also thought-provoking. And it's so interesting to see how all of these 4 books link between one another, but also sort of have similar themes all the way running through them. So I'm not sure if any of this made any sense. I really hope it did, but I'm not really sure if I made any sense. It was really hard trying to figure out what it was that I was actually thinking, because there were so many things. But yeah, I had a lot of fun sort of continuing on following the path that was already led to me, to jump on from one sort of thing to another. I had a lot of fun doing that, and I find that I probably got more out of every thing, each book and each reading experience, because I read them together. So that was basically all I wanted to talk about today. I followed the path and I wanted to share it with you. If you've done something similar like this, I would love to hear about it. I feel like I'm sore in the throat because I've been talking too long. But yeah, so that was all I wanted to share today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to share if you've had some similar reactions or experiences with books. Or if you've read any of these books that I've mentioned, all of the books I've mentioned will be linked in the description as well. So that was all I had today. I hope you have a really, really good day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.